what has happened to the extent of American power over the past decade?
Yes, well, Obama is still hugely popular in Europe, and we see that there. Whereas George W. Bush was deeply unpopular. We saw a huge bump in the popularity of not just of Obama, but of America in 2008 when he came to power right across the world. Although in some areas it was more stark than in others. So in Europe, his popularity was huge, but in other areas like the Middle East and across some parts of Southeast Asia, it was much less.
And there's been a bit of disappointment, hasn't there? Because particularly in the Middle East, he came in promising a new beginning. Of course, there's been the Arab Spring, the removal of people like Gaddafi and Mubarak, the war in Syria, the ongoing threat of Iran as well, groups like Hezbollah, perhaps even the resurgence of Al-Qaeda in the region as well. What does that say about the way Obama has dealt with the challenges of the Middle East?
Well, this is an ongoing story of the United States where they promise so much, but sometimes they tend to fall short of that ideal. And Obama has, in the Middle East, fallen short of the ideal. He came to power, one of the first things he did, he gave a speech in Cairo promising to reach out to the Islamic world and make men fences. And then his drone policies, the ongoing conflicts in Iraq, Afghanistan, really put a dampener on those hopes.
Does that also indicate, though, that despite perhaps the best of intentions or the grandest of ambitions, American reach just isn't what it used to be?
Well, the United States military still is by far the most powerful. Its economy is still the largest in the world, although China is closing on the United States in terms of its raw GDP, although in terms of just
standard
its
economics,
standard of living, it's still streaks ahead of China.
Yeah.
So it is beyond doubt the sole remaining superpower, but there are sort of rumblings around the world.
Limitations on how you use that power, isn't it? That's probably been the biggest obstacle they faced.
Yeah, and it's not just of international pressures, but also domestic as well. We see Congress is unable to agree on a budget still, and until it gets its house in order, getting its foreign policy in order is going to be difficult.
Now, President Obama talks about there wanting to end the war in Syria. Again, he faces what may be an ambition or an aspiration and the stark reality of having to deal with countries like Russia, who are opposed to his plans for Syria, and other countries in the region who are supporting the Assad regime. Why is it that when you have the biggest military, the strongest economy, you are the world's unrivaled still superpower, you still can't dictate terms?
And, well, when the Joint Chief of Staff appeared in front of Congress not too long ago, the congressmen were asking, well, what can the United States do in regards to Syria? And the military response was, anything you want. We have the largest military in the world. Whatever you want to do in Syria,
politically,
we can do. But it's a political problem. Because what the congressman was really looking for was to put the burden back on the military, saying, well, our hands are tied. And what the military did was spun that around and say, well, we can do whatever you guys want. And it's a political problem that the United States has been in two conflicts in the Middle East for the last over 10 years now, and two of the big legacies of the Obama administration is supposedly to withdraw American troops from Iraq and Afghanistan successfully. Now, the last thing they want to do is get America involved in another Middle East conflict. And so this is why America has been so hesitant to get involved in Syria.
And when you look at the legacy of the two wars of the past decade, Iraq, which is still a mess and on the verge of civil war, Sunni-Shia rifts now apparent in that country, and in Afghanistan, where Obama is now saying he has to sit down with the very people the US was saying they were going to drive from power. What does that say, again, about the US ability to prosecute a war on terror?
Well, it says something about American confidence as well, that they have something to sell. That the United States believes in their bones that if they go into these places, that democracy will bloom, that they can just show them the way and people will want to follow their example. Yet we've seen in places all around the world that that just doesn't happen, that the ingoing politics of these places often override the desire for democracy, free markets.
Just finally then, anti-American feeling. If you have a country that promises peace, that promises to bring prosperity, that has stood for what they believe are all that has been good for the past 50 years, why still so hated in some parts of the world?
It's often because of the hypocrisy, that they do promise all these good things, but they don't deliver. For a range of different reasons. Sometimes that they just have limitations of power, but they also just because of their own interests, they just can't fulfil on the promises, and that hypocrisy gap is often what causes a lot of this anti-Americanism.
Great to speak to you again, Adam. Terrific,
Stan.
particularly at a time when there's so much news happening around involving the US. Pleasure to have you here.